can't be the only person who did this, but when this whole LitRPG thing started blowing up and started going around everywhere, that you started thinking things like, is this a choose your own adventure? Is this a Dungeons and Dragons campaign in a book? Well, you're wrong, and I was wrong. So if you've been wondering what this whole LitRPG thing is, I think it's time that we break it down.
Operating it. It can be a modern day setting, it can be a fantasy setting, a science fiction setting, future, whatever.
Greetings, Cosmic Travelers. My name is J. Fitzpatrick Malden, author of character-driven hard science fiction and fantasy, most recently of the Foundry series, which is a story about first contact gone wrong. And in this video, we're going to talk about a genre that I have started to dip my toes into a little bit over the past couple years, and all the different little subgenres that go along with it. So without further ado, let's get started. LitRPG, or a literary role-playing game, is a subgenre of fiction where a character's adventures are set in a story that incorporates elements of a role-playing game or a video game, such as stats, levels, experience points, quests, and skill. Those often work for the character who enter the virtual world, and they're given it to them inside of a game or a system of some kind to where they progress as they go through. Now, who wouldn't want to read a story about a kind of lowly, nobody character who ends up growing in their stats, who ends up growing in their abilities so that they can take on some massive challenge? That is probably one of the biggest reasons all of us get super excited when we're talking about role-playing games in any space. Now, all this came about sometime around the 1970s when Gary Gygax came up with the idea for Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I don't know all the lore that goes into it. This is definitely something I'd love to learn a little bit more about, but I definitely grew up being raised on role-playing games from my earliest memories of playing the first Final Fantasy game, text-based games, Dragon Quest, and so much more. And so, the basic idea of role-playing games, you are a person that takes on a particular character or persona, and you get to play through, and you get to make decisions, and you get to act like you are this person. So you get to choose someone who is outside of who you would live in the regular world. Now, all of these are underpinned by some kind of game system, stats. We have, our strength, our agility, our wisdom, our intelligence, our charisma, all of these different stats. And they vary depending on game and depending on what style we're looking at. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is the gold standard. And so, of course, when I was a kid, I can remember playing Final Fantasy. I can remember playing Dragon Quest. I can remember playing Chrono Trigger. Of course, I've played every iteration in that back in the Final Fantasy space of Final Fantasy that you can absolutely think of, including Final Fantasy XI Online and Final Fantasy XIV. Big games for me were Warcraft, Warcraft 2, and Warcraft 3 were huge parts of my childhood, although I wasn't the biggest fan of real-time strategy games. Now, I did play Command & Conquer and all that. I really liked the fantasy setting that came from Warcraft. Now, there were other games, like text-based adventure games that were out there as well. I can remember playing those even on the earliest dates on things like CompuServe and AOL. They were essentially like chat rooms that had a text-based display, and some of them were even massively multiplayer. An old friend of mine from way back in the day in my 20s actually met her husband playing one of these text-based RPGs. Now, of course, as fan fiction and of course as video games have become more popular, and as well as RPGs and really nerdy and geeky stuff becoming way more mainstream, we've had the opportunity to see this expand into the literary space as well. Now, there are some books out there that definitely fall into the kind of catch-all genre of this, which we'll talk about in a little while, but some of them have drilled down further to be able to make these entire game systems and worlds existing inside of a book. Now, just like how we talked about in the hook at the beginning, this is not a choose-your-own-adventure situation. While if you are a part of, say, the Patreon group or the Discord channel or any of that, the community around one of these particular books or book series, you might actually get the opportunity to, let's say, influence the outcome of what the final book will be. But ultimately, it is at the author's discretion to make it however they would like for it to be. And so many of the common tropes that we see in things like this, of course, are, a hero out of time, or a hero out of their normal space, stuck in another world. They're stuck in a novel situation. We see them gaining levels as we go through this, acquiring gear and stats and getting stronger and stronger. We see them adding pets to their party and gaining party members just like you would in any other RPG. We see them interacting with situations where maybe charisma is going to help them more, or their intelligence is going to help them more, maybe their wisdom, or maybe it's the situation where their raw strength is what is going to help them push through the day. All of this is to say, I've always felt like the RPG space has been incredibly inclusive because it allows for different play styles and different abilities that can all synergize together to achieve one goal. Now, of course, over the past few years, it has absolutely blown up, and a lot of that has to do with a guy named Matt Dinniman in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. Dungeon Crawler Carl is one of my favorite, and it is how I got into the genre, so please don't toss any hate at me, guys, because I'm probably like a lot of other people in this space. However, I didn't get there because of some random TikTok thing. I might have gotten there because I asked for a book recommendation on TikTok, and that book recommendation led to Dungeon Crawler Carl, but it was not Book Talk that did it. I posted. And of course, Dungeon Crawler Carl follows this just kind of regular guy who's recently been dumped by his girlfriend. He serves in the Coast Guard, and he has his girlfriend's cat. Cat gets out, he goes outside, the apartment building he's in gets completely flattened, and then he finds himself inside of an intergalactic television show called Dungeon Crawler World. Once inside Dungeon Crawler World, he's having to literally fight for the fate of humanity, hopefully making it down to the 18th level of this show, which now exists near the core of our planet. Lots of crazy hijinks happen, and not to ruin anything, but let's just say his cat becomes sentient and she is fabulous. Now, Dungeon Crawler Carl has become a complete sensation. I'm not going to say it has everything to do with Donut. However, I'm not going to say it doesn't have to do with Donut either. And so this series incorporates a lot of the game mechanics that we mentioned before, but then also it has, well, how do you explain Dungeon Crawler Carl? It's funny, it's irreverent, it is disgusting, it is hilarious, it is heartwarming, it's really way too dark sometimes, it's heartwarming, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll make you fall in love. It just kind of does all the things. And very rarely are there book series or TV shows that I say are all the things series. Another one in the television space I would say that is kind of an all the things series I would say is Magicians. It follows much that same path. All that is to say, this book did incredibly well in the indie space because Matt Dinniman, not only did he create some really fun books, but he's also amazing at creating community around what it is that he's created. And really, this has been a ground up effort. Along came a really successful Kickstarter, which I believe is what caught the attention of Penguin Random House. And now it is the first legitimate lit RPG that I know of that has really hit the mainstream that you can go buy just about anywhere. I'm not saying you can't buy others, because of course you can. I am an indie. I am distributed through Barnes & Noble online. There are bookstores in person where you would be able to get my books. However, I do not have the marketing or backing of someone like Penguin Random House at this time. But I think what really did it for Dungeon Crawler Carl was the audio format, and I've got to tell you, they are some of the best audiobooks ever, and that's because of Jeff Hayes over at Sound Booth Theater.
I'm absolutely not wearing this. It's like one of Signet's tattoo people fell for a paper shredder.
Now, Dungeon Crawler Carl is not the only one out there, so do not mishear me on this. It is one of my favorites. I have listened through every single one of the books, and I have now gotten even my wife into it, which was kind of a surprise. I said, just go with it. I know you're gonna love it. But there are plenty others out there that are a whole lot of fun as well that are in this same space. I just recently started He Who Fights with Monsters, which has been a whole lot of fun. It is another one that shows up very often when you are searching for anything lit RPG related. He Who Fights with Monsters kind of falls in between what they call a lit RPG and an isekai, which we'll talk about here in a little while. He Who Fights with Monsters is a story about this guy named Jason who basically gets sucked into another world. And once in this other world, he realizes that as an outworlder, he is able to gain abilities. He is connected to some kind of system, whether it is a system that interacts with him directly or not. And he is gaining abilities as he's going through fighting monsters, learning new skills, taking skill books, and of course, shooting leeches out of his bloodstream. The overall mood of the book is a little bit dark at point, but to be honest, I kind of have felt a little bit cozy reading this book, and that is likely to change later because I can kind of see where things are going. And so I get the feeling that sometimes LitRPG can be both a little bit dark and crazy, but then also a little more on the cozy or slice of life side, because I even picked up Heretical Fishing, which, my gosh, guys, that book is so much fun. Now, reading Heretical Fishing and He Who Fights with Monsters back to back, I'm starting to wonder if there's some sort of Aussie connection, because both the characters are Aussies, and while there's nothing wrong with that, no problems, mate. There are plenty of others out there in the lit RPG space, such as the Primal Hunter, Warformed Stormweaver, the Hedge Wizard, System Apocalypse, and Space Seasons. And these aren't even the tip of the iceberg, guys. There's a whole website dedicated to lit RPG and all the different genres around it that is at the Royal Road. And so if this sort of progression style story is interesting to you, to be able to watch someone gain equipment, be able to gain experience, to build friends, and kind of take on an unbeatable goal, then lit RPG probably is for you.
I think winning is less important than the overall experience.
So what other kind of experiences do we have out there in this whole progression space? Let's take a look at them.
Oh yeah, what's up, Chad? Yeah, I got my Starbucks. You want me to grab an order while I'm walking over there? Oh my! Where the f am I?
You're having a regular day, you get hit by a bus, and then you wake up in another world. Well, chances are you've been isekai. And isekai is a Japanese genre of fiction. It is popular in anime, manga, and video games, whereas the protagonist is transported or reincarnated in a different, unfamiliar world. The word itself literally means different world in Japanese, and the stories often involve the character adapting to this new environment, which can be a fantasy realm, a game world, or a parallel universe. Now, going back to a couple of the other examples I mentioned earlier when we were talking about He Who Fights with Monsters or Heretical Fishing, both of these are lit RPGs, but both of them are also an isekai story. He Who Fights with Monsters, literally, Jason, the main character, just wakes up in the other world without a whole lot of explanation. I'm guessing as we go through this series, we're going to learn a little bit more about his life in our world before he ended up in that world. Heretical Fishing is different. We actually get to follow the life of this ex-billionaire son who is really trying to turn a leaf over in his life by taking up an interest, divest himself from his father's business, and he accidentally gets hit by a bus in a parking lot holding a fish, and then wakes up in a world where fishing is considered heretical. That is to say, it is against the order of things, and the religious powers and political powers don't too much care for that. Who doesn't like the idea of being isekai'd into another world? We, as human beings, often like the idea of an afterlife, and isekai is kind of that exploration of the afterlife, but being more than just ascending into heaven and everything's okay, but almost like a Valhalla situation where we're just going to continue to fight and improve ourselves, and that this is going to go on until the end of time. That maybe the actual struggle is what life is all about. And so say you're an old man and you die, and then now you get to wake up as a young man in a young body, and you get to become stronger, faster, and better. How's that for living out the perfect afterlife?
Cultivation.
Cultivation novels, or ciencia, if I pronounce it correctly, are a genre of Eastern fantasy where protagonists train and advance through physical, spiritual, or mythical means to gain superpower, extending their lives, and pursuing goals like immortality or godhood. This process is known as cultivation, and it often involves cultivating the ki, the chi, meditating, practicing martial arts, and using other esoteric arts, all of which are structured in a kind of advancement system. These stories are inspired by Eastern philosophies such as Taoism and Buddhism, and feature themes of self-improvement, combat, and understanding the fundamental laws of reality. While my research on this mostly points back to Chinese culture on this, there is definitely that whole Taoist idea or Buddhist idea of the soul, of existence, and of advancing as a human that is part of a larger system. So in these books, common tropes you'll see are people meditating, going very deep inside themselves to be able to grow and cultivate the soul inside of them, to be able to break through these meridians or break through these many layers inside of them so that they can achieve another level of power, of understanding. Some of these powers will be able to give them the ability to literally do things like shoot kamehamehas. Some of them will give them the ability to be better at martial arts or faster. Some of them will just make them smarter. Others will allow them to manipulate these spirits around them or travel into the spirit world. Case in point, think of things like The Last Airbender. Another one that honestly I think is a cultivation story, if I'm being honest, is I mean, come on. You can't tell me that Goku didn't break through the next level when he went freaking Super Saiyan on us. I was there, watching that show on reruns in the 90s when he spirit bombed on Cartoon Network for like 7 weeks in a row. Going back, things didn't quite take that long, but it was a very, very, very long fight, I think. Maybe it was just how syndication worked at the time. So I had the honor of being at a panel at Dragon Con a couple years ago where it had the likes of people of authors who wrote more in the Eastern space like Andrea Stewart and Tao Wong. After seeing Tao Wong speak and talk about food, and he has a book about food and progression and everything, I kind of started doing a little bit of digging on him and I came across his book series, 1,000 Li. This was my introduction to cultivation. Everybody says this is a great introduction to cultivation and I really enjoyed it. And so basic cultivation setup, we've got this guy, he's kind of poor and he's beginning to grow his chi inside of him so he can become more powerful and be regarded as something special in society. And so as the story goes on, he gets stronger and stronger, learns new ability, fights these spirit beasts. I think there's a lot of lessons to be said in these cultivation stories of just kind of becoming a better human being. Another great one in the same space is Cradle by Will White. However, what's funny, and I'm quoting Will White on this, is he keeps getting lumped in with LitRPG, although his books are cultivation. And so in the Cradle series, you've got a kid in a small town. This apocalyptic event is coming. He does not actually possess the ability to be able to advance, but maybe something's broken inside him. And he ends up starting to train and push against his limits until he has this huge breakthrough / granted a bit of assistance from a godlike figure. And so if you like people meditating and martial arts and becoming stronger in that sort of Eastern philosophy sort of setting, then these are absolutely for you.
Hey, Daddy.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Playing video games?
Last but certainly not least of all these is the what I call the kind of catch-all genre for all of this, and that is Gamelit. Gamelit is essentially the genre that all of this goes over, and Gamelit can kind of cover a broad category. While with LitRPG or even Cultivation, most of the time there's some sort of clear progression system the characters are walking through. They are gaining experience, they're gaining ranks, whatever it may be. However, when we look at Gamelit, it's just more about pulling on the tropes of video games, such that the main character is in some kind of game system, but the focus of the story itself is not on all the minutia of the stats and so on. In LitRPG, the stats and the abilities and all of that are typically used as part of these story devices. And so just like a Chekhov's gun where you show the gun in Act 1, it has to show up by Act 3, you may have an ability that shows up in Act 1 in a story and then shows up in Act 3 of a story to really create a turning point for the characters. Gamelit stories would include things like Ready Player One, although oftentimes it gets put in LitRPG. Now, I definitely did not include all the different subgenres here. However, there's a whole lot more in this space, and a lot of them are represented on the Royal Road website if you do want to check that out. Now, do know that that website, it is mostly indie authors, it is non-published writers, and really a lot of people kind of trying to figure out if they like to do this writing thing or not. It also includes fan fiction as well. For your more top tier talent, a lot of these you will find on Audible and of course on Amazon. Audiobook is definitely one of the most popular forms of consuming LitRPG, and a lot of the narrators out there that have been hired to do it are great talents. So if you're looking to shake up your reading a bit or do something new and any of these things sound interesting to you at all, then I would absolutely recommend going to check any of these out. I'm going to put a list of any of the books listed in this video down below so you guys can check them out and see if one of those is your next read. So go gain some experience, give yourself some skills, level up, go on a quest, and until next time, safe journeys, Cosmic Traveler. We'll see you soon.